team is trying to win its first championship. The other is trying to repeat as champion. Both teams won convincingly yesterday. It's Colorado Mines versus Ferris State for the D2 Football Championship. With Chuck Bittner, Devin Albertson, Justin Polizzi, Chris Ferguson, Matt Witwicky, Tony Nicolette, I am Brandon Meisner. Thank you for joining us tonight. Ferris State, obviously no stranger to the championship game at this point, and they were the first team to punch its ticket to McKinney. Let's start out tonight in Big Rapids, Michigan. So Ferris State dominated early, only to see West Florida tie it at 17 at the half, but the Bulldogs controlled the second half and won convincingly, came away with a 38-17 win.
Yeah, they did, Brandon. What's funny is I'm watching this game. I don't want to say that it wasn't that entertaining, but I mean, this was very much on script. Right. And the reason I say that is this, guys, we've talked on this show all year long about how Ferris has got all these, always have great line play. They've always got all these skilled guys who can run all over the place, and they do this veer action, multi-option action on offense that makes you look at all their window dressing and have to focus on all these different things. So they're just a real handful to try and defend. And if you want to have any hope of defending them, we've talked about a couple of things. First of all, you've got to be pretty strong up front. Secondly, you've got to have great sideline to sideline speed. And in Division II, to have a front seven with that combination is very difficult to come by. The other things you have to be able to do is you have to be extremely assignment sound. So there's a lot of discipline in what you have to do defensively. And as a parlay to that, you got to have gap integrity. And as I watched this game, there were a couple of different points where I saw some things that West Florida did defensively where I thought, okay, they got some guys up front. But then there were some other instances where they were getting gashed all over the place up front. And then there were some other times where sideline to sideline looked like they handled a couple things. And then there were other times where they were getting beat to the edge left and right. The thing that I noticed the most, though, was that there were tons of instances where guys were getting caught in the wash. And that's your gap integrity and your assignment handling. And it just didn't seem like to me that West Florida defense was going to be able to do that for 4 quarters. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that this looked a lot more like what we would typically expect from a Ferris in a dominating win. They had 400 yards of total offense, 309 on the ground. And Malik Mitchell took plenty of the snaps and did a ton of the work. But, I mean, you're seeing Marcus Taylor here scoring a touchdown. I mean, that really was the biggest sign of this was a Ferris doing what Ferris wants to do offensively, is that Marcus Taylor had 20 carries and 181 yards in this game.
Right.
Season highs in every category. And again, Marcus Taylor's a wide receiver. He's not their lead running back. And yet they were able to gash West Florida enough up the middle and do enough things that they wanted to do, where Taylor was able to get season highs in all those categories. And I mean, if you look back across the couple weeks previous, Pitt State really didn't run the ball anywhere near as effectively against, Ferris State didn't run the ball anywhere nearly as effectively against Pitt State. They really weren't super effective in running the ball against Grand Valley last week. A lot of their yards came on Malik Mitchell taking off when pass plays broke down. So, I mean, I think what this tells us is kind of what we've known maybe throughout the year, is that the teams in Super Region 3 are built to play a certain style of football. And it takes defenses that are put together in that way to be able to attempt to contain what Ferris does. And West Florida just didn't have it. And I give the Argos a ton of credit after being down 17-3. They took those initial punches from Ferris. They got the deep shot to Durden in the second quarter, got a stop, and then went down and got another Pee Wee Jarrett touchdown to knot things up at the half. And they even came out and had a really good drive to open the third quarter and flip the field. And it's like, okay, if they could have finished that drive off, you might have felt differently. But once Ferris went down and scored and then got the strip sack from Caleb Murphy and set themselves up with a short field, you kind of knew that West Florida just didn't have a second 14-point comeback in the context of this one game in them. And it was pretty much over at that point, as far as what I could see.
You mentioned that Malik Mitchell played most of the game. He was extremely efficient. He was 8 of 9 passing, and he's obviously been injured a lot. maybe back into the rhythm of the offense, they're going to be tough to beat because he was 8 of 9 through the air, and then Golker was 1 of 1. If they're hitting that kind of efficiency through the air with what they can do on the ground, that's tough to defend.
Yeah, it is. But again, I think that brings us back around to, if you want to have a shot to keep yourself in a game against Ferris, you have to get them away from running the ball and make them have to pass it. And it's a tall ask. It's really hard to do. But the teams that have been able to keep Ferris's scoring numbers and offense numbers at least somewhat limited are the teams that have been able to do that. And that's, hey, West Florida couldn't do that yesterday. Hats off to them on a great season. But you could kind of tell from the jump that they just weren't going to be able to hang with them in terms of being able to keep enough of a lid on what Ferris wanted to do offensively to keep themselves close enough to have a shot at the end.
Tony, to me, it felt kind of like the second quarter was kind of the outlier in the football game, because it was like Ferris was in firm control. And then all of a sudden, to West Florida's credit, they got 2 stops. They hit a few plays down the field. And all of a sudden, this game 17-all at half. It's like, how did that happen? I mean, it felt like Ferris had really controlled the action for a lot of it. And then all of a sudden, back in the third quarter, Ferris, after, kind of taking some good shots there before half, they were able to, kind of get their stuff back together, and they were able to control the rest of the football game. I thought when they started really getting pressure on Pee Wee in that third quarter, I thought the game kind of turned a little bit. And it seemed like, okay, all of a sudden, when he finished with 5 sacks, and when Pee Wee goes back, it's like we're looking to Chuck it a lot of times. And when they disrupted that, I thought it kind of put their chances to an end to a certain extent. Is that kind of how you saw it?
100%. And I was willing to give West Florida kind of that puncher's chance in the second half, just from the same perspective like you're talking about. They kind of, rallied and not owned, but they kind of won that second quarter a little bit. And that wasn't dissimilar to what we saw against Pitt State a couple of weeks ago, where, Ferris was just, clobbering them in the first quarter. And then, the Gorillas kind of figured a few things out and settled in and played a lot better over the course of the rest of the game. And so, we saw that happen in the second quarter yesterday for West Florida. And you kind of think, okay, maybe they've got a shot here. And yeah, I'm with you. I think once the pressure got dialed up and Pee Wee was kind of having a harder time getting the ball out to where he wanted to. And again, especially if you want deep shots, you just got to have time to be able to let those plays develop. And Ferris did a great job of not letting them have it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, obviously Ferris is no stranger to the championship game, 3 times in 4 years, doing a great job in Big Rapids. Another team that's doing a great job, and the program has been really good, but it's ascended to a place that it hadn't previously, is Colorado School of Mines. They played Shepherd, and these 2 offensive powerhouses combined for only 3 points in the first quarter. But Colorado School of Mines got it going in the second quarter and then went on for a 44-13 win over Shepherd. A very impressive outing for Colorado School of Mines, Whit.
Yeah, real weird first quarter. I mean, kind of just a feeling out process there a little bit. And then all of a sudden, Mines was able to hit a lot of those little short bubbles. And I think Shepherd felt the need to kind of come up a touch on those. And finally, they were able to start really getting some plays going. And Michael Zeman, I thought, ran especially hard yesterday. And, I think he looked about as fresh as he has in a while, because he gets a lot of use, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you see right here, Ronnie Brown heavily involved with Shepherd.
Yeah.
Thought a lot of that also, Brandon, was because of the fact that, a lot of their best weapons, while they were able to suit up, weren't able to do a whole lot in the game.
Right.
And here's a deep shot to Max McLeod, and he finds a way to get behind 2 guys there. And the game, all of a sudden, it started to go ahead and move Mines' direction. Brown was able to get some chunk plays here. Then you got Bajan going back, doesn't see the blitz coming on that far side, and now we're a two-score game. And it really felt like, okay, maybe his mind's going to really start cooking here. And you see Matoka hit another shot over the top. And, an underrated factor of this football team is their ability to hit those deep balls. It really is. But obviously Shepherd kept going, but you see a nice pick here, where Mines is the pressure. I thought was able to force a few things there for Bajent. He just really did not have the kind of football game we were anticipating. And here's just a course, or just a wild Matoka play that ends up going for a score like a "you got to be kidding me" kind of play. Exactly that ended up being on Sports Center as well later in the night. Matoka hits, throws another beam here for a score, and it kind of doesn't matter for them who's getting the scores. They got guys all over the place who can make plays. Matoka for another score might have been over the line there, but at the same time they were rolling at this point. Ronnie Brown's able to go ahead and get loose here, show really the athlete he is. Gets on out. Not real sure why we're running the goal line here when we're down, 30 points, but nevertheless, he had a big day, but he was kind of the only guy to really be able to get loose in this football game. Otherwise, I mean, Matoka, what he finished with 28 of 34. In the semifinals for over 370 yards and 5 touchdowns. Bajent not as good, 19 of 34 for 165 with 2 picks, did get sacked 8 times. And that pass rush and how they were bringing different blitz looks in that second quarter, I thought changed the football game. And I really thought that Mines defense that we haven't really, been saying is fantastic. I thought they really were the ones who kind of determined the outcome in this game, because we all thought that Shepherd was probably going to score, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns in this game. And they didn't score a touchdown until garbage time. And that's really kudos to their ability to bring those pressures, I thought.
That was it was, and we didn't do the research, but I think you would not be going out on a limb if you were to say that Colorado School of Mines held Tyson Bajent to maybe his worst game as a collegiate player. Right. He's got the all-time, all these all-time records, and that was not a Tyson Bajent type game. I want to relate this back to the other game though, because Ferris State recorded 5 sacks, gave up 0. And this one, Colorado School of Mine, 0 sacks, recorded 8. And that, 2 very similar defensive performances, at least in that regard, from those 2. And it shows you how important it is now protecting the quarterback, and, especially with Shepherd, because they gave up, or especially deep into territory, because Colorado School of Mine scored on the fumble recovery. So I thought that was interesting. Max McLeod with 12 receptions, 214 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's not exactly the guy.
What's funny about them, Brandon, is that, 1 week it's Josh Johnson, 1 week it's another guy. And I mean, to them, I don't think it matters. And that's why you see them having the volume of guys like that being able to really do well.
I think so. They're kind of you've mentioned it a couple times about how they played and they're a loose group, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to have some fun, go to Colorado School of Mines website, look at their roster, and then go look at all their headshots. They obviously had a contest to see who could have the goofiest bunch of headshots. Michael Zeman has like pigtail sticking up in his hair, and then of course you've seen John Matokas, and then one of the defensive players has half a beard. Like one half is clean shaven, the other half is half a beard. So it's a team that plays loose and fun. And I discovered those mug shots the other day, and I'm like, oh my God. So it's a fun group, and them getting to the national championship for the first time is a big deal. That's a remarkable achievement, because even though we know they were good, we thought, they're going to have to play some big boys to get there. And the seeding kind of helped them a little bit, we'll say. That certainly made this game easier than it might have been had you played Ferris or West Florida. But nonetheless, it's an incredible achievement to get there the first time, and it's nice to have some new blood in the championship game.
And we should remember that they started the season 0-2.
Right. Exactly.
Now, yes, those were against 2 of the best teams in the country. We know that, but nonetheless, they started the season 0-2. and they've won every game since then. That doesn't happen. I can only think of one other time that a team started 0-2 and made it the championship game. And I don't know how many times it's actually happened, but I can only think of one.
Was that Bloomsburg?
It was, and that was more
Okay.
than 20 years ago.
Yeah, it can't be many, Chuck, and you're right. I mean, it is
Chuck. Chuck, let me ask you: you've had a chance to obviously watch, Shepherd and who they've played over the years with Bagent quite a bit. Have you seen Bagent and the Shepherd offense struggle like that any time in the recent past?
I don't think they were this helpless even against Ferris last year. Because Bagent made some nice throws against Ferris, and yeah, he was pressured a lot, and I think they only put 7 points on the board. But I actually thought Mines unsettled him more yesterday, even than Ferris did last year. So, and that would be the only other thing with that even comes close to putting that kind of pressure on him and keeping him that unsettled. You know, it was probably, and it's unfortunate for him. It was probably the worst game of his life
Sure.
because I don't remember what his record was in high school, but if he lost a game, it was like you could count him on one hand. So it probably was the worst game of his life. And I think that it had to do with two things. And, you know, you and I talked about this during the week. We kind of expected that Mines would be really aggressive in pressuring him. And Brandon Moore actually alluded to that yesterday, that they knew how dangerous he was. They knew how good he was. And they were going to have to take some chances and get after him. And I think we expected that the outcome of that would be that they would get to him a good bit, but they'd probably get burned a few times as well. They were able to get away with that and never got burned. And that was because they just did such a good job with a 4 and 5 man rush up front. When they did blitz, the blitz got home so fast, Bagent never even had a chance to get the ball off. And it definitely hurt Shepherd a lot that they were way down on receiver talent. I mean, Marlon Cook and Ryan Beach suited up and they went out and they played, but they were obviously way less than 100%. Those are their two most productive wide receivers. And EJ Morgan, who was hurt last year or last week, I don't believe played at all. So they were way down on receiver talent, and it put a lot of pressure on Ronnie Brown to try to come up with something. And he played really well and ended up being the bulk of their offense. But no, it's really hard to take a team that has that much talent and make them look as helpless as Mines did yesterday. So it's just a phenomenal defensive effort. I was way more surprised that way. I thought that Mines would have a lot of success offensively.
Piggyback on that, Devin.
I did not expect their defense to completely stifle Shepherd the way they did.
Yeah, that's what I kind of noticed there. 6 sacks in the first half. I thought 4 were kind of off the pass rush, but the other 2, I believe, were one was Bagent fumbled a snap, and the other one was Bagent ran around for about 20 seconds, and nobody got open. And Mines be able to get the sack there late in the play. It felt like Mines covered really well. They were really physical with the Shepherd receivers too. I think knowing they were kind of down on talent a little bit there, they used that to their advantage and played really physical with them and kind of threw the timing of the offense off. And by the time Bagent was able to find somebody, there was someone either around him or hitting him kind of deal. It just felt like it was a great cohesive effort by that Mines defense with not only the front 4, but also the back 7 working in tandem to really make Bagent's life miserable kind of there for the entire game on there. And I mean, I took the over. I was hoping for a lot of points there, and Mines delivered. Shepherd was not on that side of it. So credit to Mines and that defense. It's a different challenge next week against Ferris, different type of offense, but they did lead all divisions in sacks this year for a reason. They got 8 more yesterday on there. So a really impressive performance by the Mines defense. I was really impressed with what they did.
All right. And Chris, did you have something to add?
I just want to point something out. And maybe this is a little bit of a game. So Mines is new to the championship game. Think about all the teams that have made it to the championship game for the first time since 2011.
Shepherd would be one. Commerce
Wayne
and
State.
West Florida. Yeah.
Wayne State.
Wayne State, Winston-Salem State.
Mankato.
Pueblo,
Yeah, I mean,
Pueblo.
I think it's amazing. I think it's great for division.
It is. That is. I mean,
Did somebody say Mankato?
yeah, Minnesota State. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a hell of an observation, Ferg. I mean, and that's nice and healthy too, because for a while, I mean, don't get me wrong, all levels of college football, it's the same people over and over. It's it's always Bama or Georgia, and it's always Mount Union, or it's always
North Dakota State.
Yes, exactly. So it's very healthy what's been happening lately, where there are new teams That's a great observation. Okay, let's go
I have
ahead.
one question.
Yeah.
I have one question for you before we move
Go
on
ahead.
from this game. So first of all, the view from the stadium there at Mines is fantastic. Just a beautiful stadium out there. And they put a graphic up there. They've been playing there since 1893. And I would ask Whit if you remembered that 6-0 win for Mines over University of Denver from that game, if you remember what happened there. And
I was just a pup then, so yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd have to go back to my mentor Bob Green and see what his thoughts are on that.
Very good. All right, let's go ahead and Marvin E, Kevin C, thank you. We have not added you to the video. Going to go ahead and thank our supporters, and we come back. Lots of news to cover in Division II, not related to the championship game, but we'll be right back. Just wanted to take this opportunity to thank those who have supported D2 Football this year. D2 Football is free, but it isn't cheap. Your support helps offset our expenses and allows us to expand our coverage. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us. Visit d2football.com/support. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, click contact on the website to find our mailing address. But again, thank you for supporting D2 Football. Well, today, while preparing for the show, West Florida obviously has no concern for our efforts and the things that we're trying to get done, because they announced that Pete Shinnick is leaving, and now he accepted a job at Towson at FCS level. But that is a heck of a loss for West Florida to lose him. Having said that, he's put them in a great situation. That's going to be a heck of a job, and they're going to have some kick butt candidates for that. But Shinnick is leaving.
I would just point out real quick that now that city, Baltimore, has two coaches that did exceptionally well at the Division II level, because Damon Wilson's at Morgan State, and they do play each other. So it's going to be awesome that they didn't play against each other at the Division II level, but there's a good chance that they will at the FCS level.
Yeah, those schools are almost neighbors, Towson and Morgan State. So obviously it's a great pickup for Towson. We had been hearing rumors about Pete possibly landing in a couple of other places. I think Towson's a good spot for him, other than the fact that the weather in Baltimore is not quite as good as it is in Pensacola. I think it's a good spot for him. You can win there. They don't have a long football tradition at Towson, but their recent history is pretty good. They've actually been in the FCS championship game in the last 5-6 years. I don't remember exactly what year they made it. They've been in the playoffs a couple times. So you can win there. The resources there are really good. The facilities are really good. And I don't think the people in Towson have any idea how good of a football coach they're getting. Just reading some of their social media, their fan base, I guess, was disappointed that Dabo Swinney didn't resign and take the job. Yeah, they're like, well, I thought we would have attracted somebody who's been winning in Division I. Like, you guys have no idea how good of a football coach you're getting. Go look at his history. What he did at UNC Pembroke and West Florida, he started both of those programs.
But you know what?
Both of them. People forget he got Pembroke into the playoffs within a couple of years as well, in a very difficult region.
Yes.
And what he did in West Florida is probably one of the best accomplishments you could find in the last 50 years of college football. So they have no idea how well they did with this hire.
That's probably a byproduct of a bigger problem, Chuck, where people think that anybody that plays below their level or coaches below their level is not any good. But the fact is that, as we've talked about many times, there's lots of overlap, and there are 50 coaches. Well, maybe not 50, I don't know, but I would guarantee there are 20 that could go up and dominate at any level above us. And it's just the way it works sometimes. But same goes with teams. But I think that's probably a bigger byproduct. West Florida, that's a very desirable job. Think about, all the players, and you're not freezing your butt off all winter. So,
see, I was told West Florida and like Indiana have the same weather climate, Brandon.
I was told that on our message board. I was told that Pensacola was the same as North Indiana. Having said that, I believe it was said in jest, and I believe the person who said it is actually one of the folks that watches this show. He's a West Florida grad. He might not be watching tonight, but as a West Florida fan, I think he was kind of tongue in cheek. But because he said that, and I looked, and it was. He said it was closer to Miami or far away from Miami, and I looked, and it was like 78 in Miami, 71 in Pensacola, and then it was like 39 in Fort Wayne and 31 in Big Rapids. I'm like, no, not even close, guys.
As a former Pensacola resident, I would just say that it probably gets below 30, maybe 5 days out of the year.
And Pete had some assistants with him that have been with him for a long time, who I think could be good candidates for that if they don't go with him.
Sure.
But I think West Florida really needs to open this up for a national search because
sure.
they should get some really good candidates for that job.
Right. You could hire from within at any time. You never know who might want to come there until you do open it up. So,
Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. Another coaching hire was announced this week. Jim Glogowski was named the coach at Sioux Falls. So, Whit, you were there. Tell us about Glogowski.
Yeah, Sioux Falls has had kind of a 4-week window that's occurred where, they end up getting rid of a coach, and they ended up, I thought, really coming out, smelling like a rose in this because Glogowski comes in from Mankato, defensive coordinator, really strong recruiter for the Mavs, and a highly desired coach in this region. And for them to get him, I think, was a pretty big catch. And it'll be interesting to see how things go. USF now has a coach from Mankato, and Mankato's going to have to fill in their DC spot. And it's what hasn't kind of fully come out yet, but basically they've got essentially a sketch of what the schedule is going to look like, and going forward with Upper Iowa dropping out, which we talked about a week ago. And Glogowski even kind of made mention the fact that it's going to be funny that Mankato comes to Sioux Falls week 1. Yep. So that's going to make for a pretty interesting week 1 game. And that's assuming things go as Jim had mentioned in the presser. He just kind of made a quick comment about it, but I think it's a strong hire, and it'll he's going to fill out staff here upcoming in the weeks, and that'll be probably pretty interesting to watch for a squad like this.
Yeah, I think it's a good hire for a good school. I think there's a lot of potential for Sioux Falls to get closer to what they were in the NAIA. Now, they'll never reach that because nobody does, because they were the dominant team for a pretty long time in the NAIA, just blowing people out. And every level you grow up, it gets harder to do that. Having said that, I would not be surprised to be perennial playoff contender, guarantee, you make the playoffs 75% of the time. And he's going to have, if he's the kind of guy I believe and view him as from the outside, he's going to have a shot at maybe having a team that's good enough to win the national championship here and there.
Well, they're going to have some immediate challenges, and I think Coach Glow realizes this because they had a fair amount of guys jump in the portal during the uncertainty of the last month. And, a lot of them were guys who were all conference players and who are getting FCS offers. I mean, one's even probably going to end up at Iowa State or Minnesota. So, some of those guys, maybe they're gone anyway without a coaching change because of the fact that they've improved their marketability. But, at the same time, Sioux Falls has made the playoffs once in the last 4 seasons. And that's going to be something that's going to be a pressure he's going to have immediately, is to make sure they become a playoff team a little more frequently than that.
Yep. So anyway, also one thing that I heard in his press conference, I didn't see because you couldn't see very well, but I heard him say that he watches this show every weekend. And he said that this group, makes Division II football a big deal. And if he's watching today, I wanted to say thank you for those comments, because that is one of the reasons that we do this. Certainly we're not doing it to get rich. But
and you know what, Brandon, he mentioned, I thought it was a nice comment. And, he mentioned wits like Herb Street, and which I think is a very astute observation. He's a good looking guy. I'm a good looking guy. I mean, who can blame him?
Mute his mic.
Nowhere close is there any resemblance between you two.
I do want to brag. I do want to brag on. I do want to brag on Whit for a second, though, because Sioux Falls actually used a quote from Whit in one of their infographics. So typically when you hire a new coach, they'll put out some comments from people that coach has worked with, other sitting head coaches, about why it's a great hire and a great fit and things like that. And I don't remember who else was quoted, but I think that they had, maybe the athletic director and the president. And then
one was Kalen DeBoer, which is
Kalen DeBoer. That's right. Yeah. And then Matt Whitson.
Kalen should be so lucky to be on the same presser sheet with me. I agree.
Second time within a month, I think that Whit was quoted by a university in their infographics. So,
that's true. Thank you. Both wear purple. Thank you, Ashland. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
But in all seriousness, it was really cool.
See what Chuck did there? That was pretty interesting. Chuck, I like the way you did that.
That was the funny part. But in all seriousness, the fact that they think enough of Whit and his information and his knowledge of the conference to actually use his comment, I think says a lot.
Yep. So anyway, thank you again, Jim Glogowski, new head coach at Sioux Falls. Missouri Western has a new head coach. Tyler Fenwick returned. He was their offensive coordinator previously, and was an offensive coordinator there when they had their best team ever in 2012. They won the MIAA outright, advanced a few rounds in the playoffs, and I think it's a hire that a lot of people are very happy with. Have you had any feedback from this hire from St. Joe at all, Devin?
I haven't yet, no, but just kind of looking through what he's done there. I know last year we were really high on Southeastern Oklahoma. I know Chuck was in particular, watching them kind of play, and the improvement he made from year 1 to year 2 there at Southeastern, when he got some of his own kind of guys in there and was able to get his system kind of run there, made a big improvement. And they had a down year this year. I think they had turnover issues, kind of deal with that. It really kind of set them behind the 8 ball. But I like what he's done down there at Southeastern Oklahoma. I think he'll have better talent at Western to kind of get there and have already on campus kind of deal. So if they can get those guys to stay, they should be interesting this next year. It's a really tough conference to kind of improve your status in there. So I'm interested to see what he does there. I think it's one of the better hires they could have had there. So I think it's a guy who knows St. Joe, knows Missouri Western, knows the MIAA. So they're going to be really good offensively, I think, going forward on there, which will make them very interesting for me personally to watch because I love offense there with Western. So,
Devin, what do you think the expectations are for coming into a role like Mo West?
What they are, what they should be. I think what they should be is get 8-9 wins a year kind of deal on there, and every once in a while be able to jump up to that 10-win range kind of deal. Maybe get a chance for the playoffs on there. It's just really tough the way the conference is right now with Northwest the way they are, Pitt State kind of rising back to where they used to be kind of deal towards top of the conference, and then Kearney, and there's still UCO with Adam Dorrell down there. So it's really tough to break into the top 4 or 5 in the conference to be in that discussion to make the playoffs. We saw Emporia State this year was the 3rd best team in the conference. They're always well coached over there. So it's just tough to break into that top half. But I think 7-8 wins, and then every once in a while be able to jump to that 9-10 win range kind of make the playoffs is where you want to be at Western. I'm not sure if that's their expectations. Maybe they want to be a little maybe beating Northwest more kind of deal is definitely one of the big expectations there. It's just really tough to break into that top quarter of the conference kind of deal.
Sure.
Devin, I got a question for you.
Yes.
So people on this show really don't pay much attention to the MIAA. So what was the problem with Missouri Western over the last couple of years?
I would say it was the inconsistency from week in to week out. We saw it the first 2 weeks. They came out, they destroyed Central Oklahoma. They took out Fort Hays fairly easily on there. Like, okay, this team might be able to do something, and then they just completely fell apart. They got rolled by Emporia. They had a good half versus Northwest and played bad second half. They even went down to Northeastern State, who was not good. They had 1 win this year versus Lincoln, and they were down in the 4th quarter to them. And it's like consistency just wasn't there. They had a lot of talent. They never got everything put together kind of deal with that from game to game, from quarter to quarter kind of deal. It just felt like they were always inconsistent with it. Their defense was super talented. I talked to some coaches after some games. They're like, they're really talented. They're a tough team to play, but they just don't win consistently enough, if that makes sense on there. It's a tough matchup. They just didn't win enough games.
But Massey still had them as a 38-point favorite in a game against Saginaw Valley, correct?
Oh, of course, probably.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. I just want to make sure we were still good on that.
Well, they're like 35 miles from Northwest Missouri, so that automatically gives them
proximity gets them a couple 100 bonus points. So
all right, let's go ahead.
I still crack up at the trolling that Northwest does with Missouri Western, doing this travels this summer and see this huge billboard right outside of St. Joe about Northwest. So
yeah, Every time
That
I go
always
home to see
cracks
my
me up.
parents, I'm like, oh, there's the Bearcat sign just outside of St. Joe. Let's go. Let's go home. So it's funny because I think you mentioned that over the summer, Chris, where like you shot by Maryville and you saw the Bearcat stickers on everybody's cars. It's pretty much like Maryville, they jump over St. Joe and they invade Kansas City. So it's kind of a weird little area there where St. Joe's like, we don't want to go there. And then it's just Maryville to Kansas City kind of deal with the Bearcat Nation kind of deal.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on. So Southeastern Oklahoma obviously had a vacancy because of Tyler Fenwick going to Missouri Western, and they're bringing home an old friend, Bo Atterbury, who has been the head coach at Texas A&M Kingsville, Southeastern Oklahoma, and then also at Arkansas Tech for an off season. But he had been at, I think it's Paris High School is where he had been, and so he comes back there. So I think the crowd there is pretty happy with the hiring. Now, another school has a vacancy that has not been filled yet because the announcement was just Thursday, Friday, but Paul Winters is out after 19 seasons at Wayne State. And this is a guy who had a team, as we just mentioned 10 minutes ago, that had made the national championship game, but they haven't had much success, and he is out. So, Tony, what do you think, or in your opinion, what is the ceiling for that Wayne State program?
Well, you'd like to think that it's actually relatively high from the standpoint that you are a university that is on the average year and in most years has the largest enrollment in all of Division II. Not that enrollment means everything, but it does, equate to a larger, funding scenario that the university operates on in total. But they are a research university as well. So, I mean, the breadth of intellectual and academic talent that you can look at and the different types of courses of study that you can have available to you in one of the largest metropolitan cities in the United States. I mean, there's a lot to like about being able to go to school in a big city like that. So you'd think on its face that there's a lot to like about Wayne State. Its academic reputation is extremely well regarded. I mean, like I say, they're a research institution. They have a medical school. I mean, they got all kinds of stuff down there. And of course, Detroit is still a hotbed for high school talent. All the rest of the GLIAC and much of the country pulls from it. But you're also, a relatively short distance from Ohio, which has a ton of talent. And so you'd think that you could recruit to that pretty well. And if you really look at it in general, Winters has actually had a lot of good guys, a lot of good players, a lot of all GLIAC honorees, some All-Americans.
Harlan Hill
had more than a couple
Harlan Hill winner.
Well, so that you'd think that they could get a lot of good players in there, and yet here he is, 19 seasons in, and he's batting .470. I mean, it's just
right. Reportedly, and again, it's hard to know if these things are true or not. He was making about $250,000 a year there. So they're not afraid to pay for a coach. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, that'll have some people that would love to have that kind of salary.
That's FCS money.
Yeah. And they have a super passionate fan base too. That's the thing. I mean, they've been playing football there for I think it's over 100 years. They may not have 100 seasons in, but I think if my memory serves, their first football season might have been in 1920. So, I mean, if football is a long-standing tradition at Wayne State, I mean, so you'd think that there would be a higher level of success there than maybe what they've seen. And I think that's part of maybe what finally, kind of straw broke the camel's back. And I mean, it's 4 of the last 5 years we're losing seasons. And so at a certain point, it's something had to give.
Right. Well, Justin.
Well, so we still have a couple of vacancies open up to this point and a couple more opening now. But I just want to ask the panel, who do y'all think has made the biggest splash on this cycle so far of coaching hires? Anybody have a take on that?
I don't know. There are a lot of gigs that are still open.
Yeah. I think that's
Catawba's still open.
There could be some. There could be some others that open up. We still in Division II, we see a lot of that trickle down effect as Division I staff start to take shape. Sometimes sitting D2 coaches get plucked to go serve as a coordinator on an FBS or FCS staff. That happened to several coaches last year. So we probably haven't even seen the end of all of the openings that are going to happen. So As far as hirings to backfill the coaches that left,
I actually like the Golgowski hire the best out of all of them so far.
I think that one's got kind of a two-pronged thing between Sioux Falls, getting a different coach and essentially a staff, and then Mankato, kind of having to replace a really senior guy with them who was a strong recruiter, defensive coordinator. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I'm just
I do
waiting.
like I do like the Fenwick hire at Mo West. I think that's probably about as good as they could do to get a guy who's been a winner at 2 other D2 stops in that area, because he was at Southeastern and he was at Missouri S&T for several years.
Right.
I think he's third on the all-time wins list there. So
Well,
get a guy who's been a winning head coach in that area, I think is good. But
when he was their coordinator in 2012, that team was legit. It imploded at Mankato, but the team itself was really good. It was the kind of team that could have won a national championship, and and he was part of that. So we'll see.
Let's just wait. Let's just wait until we see what West Texas does.
yeah,
that's a big opening.
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely, it is.
There are a lot of them.
There are
One so far.
Yep. So been that's true. Those are some interesting openings. So let's go ahead and move on to some non-coaching news. The Charlotte Post reports that the CIAA will end its scheduling partnership with Chowan and will admit Bluefield State. That'll be effective July 1st. So let's see. Who should we have talk about this? Chuck, Chris, go ahead.
Well, yeah, of course we're going to talk about this news because it's a pretty big deal, and it really there's the fans in the CIAA never really liked Chowan for various reasons, and when they left the conference in all other sports to go to Conference Carolinas, that was really done because they were just sports that the CIAA just didn't sponsor that Chowan had. So, now you got a Bluefield State that restarted football a couple years ago, has actually been competitive against part of the CIAA, and has actually been a member like way, way, way in the past. This was kind of a no-brainer. It's probably one of the worst kept secrets in HBCU circles.
Gotcha.
And I think now there's just this. The more fascinating question is, where does Chowan go?
Right.
Because the SAC's pretty full, right?
Well, there's an answer there, but when Anderson starts football, that becomes possibly the answer. Having said that, there are lots of teams that are having issues scheduling, so I think Chowan would have some opportunities this year to schedule some teams they might never have scheduled otherwise.
They can come hang out in the GLIAC if they want.
Right. And the Gulf South Conference, you're just just throwing them to the
I'm brokering right now. Active.
And in all seriousness, Chowan would be such a great pickup for a team in the Gulf South of the GLIAC because they're a winning football team. So, if a team like, a Grand Valley or a Ferris or Valdosta or whoever plays them, very likely that's a win for that team, but you're probably going to get, a 7 or maybe 8 win, record out of Chowan, depending on how their schedule shapes up.
Yep. Agreed.
And even if they don't win a whole lot of games, they still schedule a team that's been good in the past. It won't count for the numbers there, but you'll look at least a little respect for that. They schedule a team that's been really solid in the past, kind of deal.
Yeah. Well, and this is great for Bluefield State. I'm really happy for them. It's, Chowan kind of gets they have to scrap together and figure out what they're going to do. But I'm really happy for Bluefield State because the work that they did putting that program together in a year, less than a year, from when they announced it to when they started, playing on the field, the product that they've put on the field in that short period of time is pretty darn impressive. So I'm excited to see what they can do in the CIAA. I think, Chris, do you know offhand what their record was the last couple of years? 3-1 against the CIAA?
Something like that. They won against Elizabeth City. They won against Johnson C. Smith, and they lost to Virginia State. So yeah.
The only negative to this is that Bluefield had a nice stream on YouTube every week, and now they're going to go hide behind the CIAA paywall.
Well, I don't know that the CIAA, Chris, I don't know if you saw this, but they put out something about media partnerships, and it was very ambiguous. They didn't make any specific notation about what they're doing, but it kind of read like maybe they're looking at a streaming partner. I don't know if it's a Flow kind of deal or something like that. probably behind a paywall, but maybe in an area where we're already consuming some other games.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is that it's probably going to force how the CIAA does divisions, because Bluefield's kind of like out of the footprint. They're really close to the footprint, but they're out of it.
I was
So
going to ask you about that. The geographical footprint of Bluefield. How does that work there with the CIAA?
So they're really close to what is the CIAA South. The closest school to them is Winston-Salem, and then Livingstone and Charlotte, with John C. Smith. So in the past, the CIAA has had an East-West format. I think we're going to go back to that. Is what I foresee.
Okay.
Or scrap divisions altogether. That seems to be kind of the trend in college athletics. I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. And speaking of scheduling issues, Northern Sun, they have an odd number of teams. So they're in talks of scheduling 10 games for a conference schedule next year. Whit, explain what's going on there, please.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked a little bit about this, that Upper Iowa, to some extent, kind of left the league hanging a little bit for 2023 by their departure to the GLVC, without a whole lot of time to figure this out. So now at 13 teams, the Northern Sun is essentially, looking to go ahead and have a 2013 schedule that's going to have what seems to be 10 league games, which would leave an open date for everyone, which for the purpose of trying to help out everyone who may need to have a game where they're looking for one in 2023. This would be a nice time for people to be able to look into potentially having the Northern Sun on one of those dates. And that's not a thing that we've been able to talk about for, over 10 years. So we can only hope, and us football nerds really hope, that something like this would lead, of course, to the idea of a little bit more open scheduling and not quite as much silo as we've had. And who knows, the Northern Sun may continue this model going forward. I kind of get the impression that would be the case. And maybe does that potentially open the eyes up to some of the others, the MIAAs, the GAC and others, to maybe, hey, we've got some regional partners here that could help us make this happen. And, I just think it's a real positive. Nothing's out there officially on websites or what have you, but it would just be nice if the Northern Sun can also kind of find some folks at the last moment to help fill out some of that scheduling. That could mean anyone from maybe the RMAC. The RMAC's got some teams that are far enough east that they wouldn't be a difficult schedule for some of the Northern Sun teams. You've got some of the GLVC, obviously, is just to the south, and they're not silo. And then the GLIAC would have some select teams that I think would still fit a geographic footprint. So it's going to be some of those decisions for them to make. If we're talking about a 10-hour travel, I don't really know if that's real fun for anybody involved.
So Chowan's out.
Chowan probably is out unless they want to fly on in. But otherwise, it's encouraging to see some of this activity right now as we lead up to the off season.
It sure feels like we're headed in the right direction, doesn't it?
Yeah, you'd like to think so. Maybe it's going to be a little one piece at a time.
Yep. But anyway, who knows? Maybe it'll all explode, and in 2 years we'll have the same kind of great non-conference schedules we had previously. Last thing we're going to touch on in this segment, Harlan Hill Trophy will be announced Friday. The voting was done on Friday, so any game that happened this week will not affect it. So obviously Caleb Murphy, John Matoka, and Tyson Bajan are all candidates for that award and played this week. But this weekend's games will not have affected or be affected by that. So, all right, a reminder that there will be a championship game played this Saturday. We're going to have a pregame show. And the championship game will be on ESPNU. You see that's DirecTV Dish and ESPN Plus. If you don't have ESPNU as part of your the way you consume media, you can do Plus for $10 a month. I signed up for it to get the semifinal games yesterday. But we will have a pregame show. Start that at 8 11:30 Eastern. As it says, kickoff will be at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll have interviews with participants. We'll have our picks and much more. We had a pregame show last year and had a great time with it, and we will do much the same kind of thing this year. Let's move on to the pick'em results, guys. Oh, hold on. All right.
And Brandon, for those
Yep.
who missed it last year, you can still find our preview show on YouTube with me standing outside the window with music blaring. It's quite good entertainment. Go look it up on the YouTube.
It is. And if I recall, most of the pregame show was you going, God, I don't like the way I look on this stream. I just don't like the way I look on the stream.
Camera adds 15 pounds. So.
Chuck.
with hurt for the first time in his life. So
Once
all right.
again.
He's
All right. All right. These are the results. Ferris State won in the under. So anybody who picked other than that didn't have as good a day as they could have. Colorado School of Mines and the under was the answer there. And Colorado School of Mines didn't let us down, those of us who picked the over. But Shepard, I'm not disappointed that you lost, but I'm disappointed that you wouldn't get us to the over. So
for those of us who took the over, we were hoping the losing team would show up a little more offensively.
That is correct. So I've never gambled on sports in my life. I've never gambled on sports in my life, but because of this, I got just a little bit of the feeling that degenerate gamblers must have when they're rooting for stupid things to happen to try to get points. It was ridiculous. Stay in bounds, come on, stuff like that. It was just.
Devin's Twitter feed was quite amusing to watch because he was tracking down to see if they can get to the over.
The funny thing is there, Chris, Brandon and I were watching the game together here in Kansas City. In the first game, we're like, okay, get a stop, no more points, keep the under here. And the next game, we're like, come on, Shepard, you got to score here. Throw a pick six. I don't care. Just points of some way. Like, I got 9 points away. And we're like, no, we're so close. We're like, Mines missed a field goal in the first quarter. We're like, if they score a touchdown, we miss this by 2 points because of a missed field goal. College kickers, man. I swear.
Well, after chastising Shepard, I want to thank Ferris State because they kneeled deep in.
Yes, they did.
We cheered so hard.
Yes, because they're like, come on, kneel it, and they did to keep the under. So at least that'd be 75% right. These are the standings for the year. Chuck, who did not pick an over-under, cheater, is now in first place. Devin in second, Matt in third, I'm in fourth, and then Chris and Justin rounded out. So,
why is he a cheater, man? He was smart like me and taking both unders. You're just bad.
maybe he did.
I can't believe the over-under is going to cost me this year. Unbelievable.
It was fun. We should do more stuff like that next year, or pick special teams categories. All right,
there we go.
All right,
over under 2.5 field goals.
If you want to know who we are going to pick next week, you're going to have to tune in to our pregame show before the game. That's where we will announce our picks for the championship.
What a tease! I like it.
Yep. Well, we want people to watch that. We had a lot of fun doing it, and last year we did it without even announcing it to anybody that we were going to do it. So, I mean, I would think I think this would work very well at a place that, like, where you're a bunch of Ferris people or a bunch of Mines people meet, you watch that. When it's over, you turn over to the game. It provides you with, 4.5 hours of stuff concerning your school, not just 3 hours, et cetera, et cetera. But who knows how people will consume it. That changes every day. So I wanted to thank ESPN Plus for their for the video highlights that we use. Otherwise, it's time to hit the questions now, and let's go ahead and I'm going to look at one first. Line play matters. You are right, Joe. And the best part about Joe's comment is that when I pull it up right now, it knocks Devin off the screen. But
That's
yeah, yeah,
More than
line play does matter, Joe. And he posted that when Tony was talking about playing against Ferris and how you have to be different when you're playing against Ferris or some of the Super Region 3 teams. It's one of the reasons that forever at the D1 level, I always thought it was unfair that all the bowl games were played in weather that favored the Southern teams because they never had to prepare to play in a snowstorm. And so it was, you always had theoretical home field advantage in the weather. And that's one thing that's very unique and very unique or very neat about lower levels of college football with playoffs is that you can't just be a team that's going to play in perfect weather all the time. You have to be built to go play in some weird spots that you might not otherwise play in. And I think that's a fun thing. And that goes back to line play. The GLIAC, as I've been telling, all year that the line play was better than the MIAA, and that proved, that showed. And now the GLIAC showed that its line play is better than the Gulf South, at least, a one game comparison, because Ferris dominated on the ground with the play of their line, which isn't even nearly as good as it was last year.
Well,
SR2 will get you next year.
I'll ask the one coach on the staff. I'll put Justin on the spot. So
that's what we like to do.
One of the things I wondered, Justin, was whether West Florida was just at an immediate disadvantage just because they run a 3-down lineman set out of the gate. And it just struck me that if you're trying to gum up the middle at ball against Ferris, not having another big dude in the middle to try and jam things up just seems like and I realize that's their base set, but it strikes me that they were at an immediate disadvantage just because of that.
It's hard, having seen Ferris play this year, they're big up front. They're big and they'll drive you off the ball. So you have to do some things to get creative with that 3-down front. You've got to bring some linebackers. You got to do some twists and some stunts, try to get some people loose. Because if you go one-on-one against a Grand Valley or a Ferris State or one of those type teams, they're going to mash you. They're just literally going to mash you down. And we saw that a little bit on Saturday. I think that, Ferris State, they're big, they're massive. I've seen them play in person. They're huge. And like I said, if you just with the three linemen, if you get creased and that linebacker doesn't fit right, you're in trouble. And we saw that a couple times on Saturday. Those teams in the GLIAC, they've got big linemen. And it's a little bit different than maybe we see down south. You know what I mean? And so it's just different types of play in different areas. But that's the one thing that stands out to me up there is especially in that conference, they've got some big guys, and you play that 3-down front, you better be physical and you better be fast and able to come off some blocks. Cause if you miss a gap and you don't fit it right, it's going to be a long day. And the way that Ferris State with their read, with the option play that you see right there, you get that linebacker to fit and they're outside before you know it. And they've got a crease or they fit outside to take away that run. The big lines, they've created that gap or that seam, and the quarterback's hitting it. And once you give them some space, it's hard to recover. So yeah, line play is huge, and the 3-down front, it can be hard. It's not saying you can't do it, but you have to fit appropriately at that second level, and if you don't, you're in trouble.
I just want to mention that it's really interesting how West Florida, just got pushed around, at least given the fact that they do play a team that has, an option-based offense in the regular season. So this isn't anything, I guess, totally new to them. And I think it just speaks to how physical Ferris was.
Yeah.
They might see it before, but they haven't seen it like this kind of. I know we hate saying it, Brandon hates hearing that kind of deal, but like it is different playing a team that's got an average line play versus a team like Ferris who has above average line play, and we'll just push. You might be in the right spot until they shove you out of the way 3 yards, and there's a crease there. It just, you've seen it before, but not to that physicality state kind of deal with that. And I think that's why it took a quarter for them to first adjust to that, and then the second half they just got worn out by I just felt like they got worn down, just getting repeatedly smashed in the mouth. They just hard to recover from that. Just it was a slow death there for West Florida in the second half.
Right. Agreed.
All right. Let's go with this one first. I think Mines would have beaten West Florida as well, not in the blowout, but I think they're better. Yeah, I didn't mean – that was a response to something I'd said earlier, and I didn't mean to discredit and say the only reason Mines made it was because of the way the bracket's set up. Mines has shown that it can play with and beat the best
Grand
teams in the
Valley.
country. Yes, I mean it was not an insult. No offense was intended, and I agree
But it
with
is
you,
different
Ryan.
playing at home compared to playing at Pensacola and stuff like
Yeah.
that. There's been different factors. And if they would have been on the road at West Florida or hosting West Florida, then things just changed just slightly there with matchups. So
Well, and look, you say what you want, and however it turns out this weekend, but you look at the way that Colorado Mines played on Saturday, and it goes back, I think, to the pictures that you talked about, Brandon,
Mm-hmm.
and just their goofiness and their headshots, and like they're playing hard and they're playing for each other, guys. They're
I
playing,
agree with that.
they're having fun.
Really are.
They don't care. And when you have
They're
a team
loose.
like that, they're dangerous because they don't care. It's almost like they're playing with the house's money, so to speak. Like they don't care. They go out there, they have fun, and they play fast, they play free, and they make things happen. So, you have a team like that, they're dangerous. Maybe they're not as talented, maybe whatever you want to say. But when you play like that and you start building that confidence, they're hard to beat now. Whether you're home or away, they're hard to beat.
It'll be real fun to watch, and I'm right there with you, Justin, in that all those things you said are true, but I think people may have underestimated them all year in terms of just what they're capable of up front, particularly on defense. This is not your standard fare RMAC team that I've been used to seeing over the last 10, 15 years. This is a team up front on defense that can play. And so would they have blown West Florida out? Okay, maybe not. But if they'd have gone in if they'd have beat them by 17 points, wouldn't have fazed me in a second. In fact, I would have almost expected it. That's how good that Mines team is. They're no joke.
Mines in West Florida would have just turned into one of those high-scoring Gulf South type games that we've seen this year. I feel like,
and Mines can hang with that. Mines can hang with that. That's one of the things that makes Mines so tough is they can hang.
I think Mines would have gotten after
and they
Pee
can
Wee.
get into a track meet and they can beat you either way.
Yeah, it's kind of what we talked about last week, Tony, with playing multiple different styles, and they can get in a shootout with Matoka, or they can grind out with Zeman. Their defense can get after you, or they can play in a shootout, low scoring game. There are different varies they can play, kind of deal, depending on the situation. They're very smart and adaptable in that way, kind of deal. So, good job to the nerds. And now, by the way, I love their student section signs this past week. They were hilarious. So, shout out to the Mines student section.
Yes, they had.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
I was gonna.
There's some humor.
Yes, they do. It was like they had things nerds rule. Of course, they had the that's all right, that's okay, you'll be working for us someday. That's pretty cliche. Everybody has that, and anybody who has that, I tell them clearly you didn't know where I went to school because I'll never be qualified enough to work for you. So that's a different quality of person that they're going there. So that's going there. And yes, last thing tonight. Carson Newman played at mine several years ago. One of the coolest places the Eagles have played. That I totally agree. That it looks really cool. That's why I included it on that video intro. And it's one of the nice ones. So, all right, guys, that will do it for us tonight. Again, reminder to look at or to watch out for our pregame show. It'll be 11:30 Eastern time, and it will be on all the same places you usually watch us: Twitter, Facebook, and in YouTube. So again, for Chuck Bittner, Justin Blizzy, Matt Witwicky, Texas A&M Commerce grad 22, Chris Ferguson, and Tony Nicolette, and Devin Albertson, I am Brandon Meisner. Thank you very, very much for watching Inside D2 Football.